Welcome to Midwest Mind Meld with your hosts, Josh and Jason.
Hola, my Midwest comrades. I'm Josh.
And I'm Jason.
Jason, how you doing tonight, man?
Oh, not too bad. Had a pretty good day. Went to Omaha. Bought a new toy, so can't wait to get that out and play. How about your day?
Oh, not too bad. I just found out that we are now on 4 platforms, so
Yeah,
I'm
it's
excited
big news
about
for
that.
us. Absolutely.
Very big news for us. Well, man, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I want to get right into it. We are going to discuss rape culture today. And I just want to know, what do you think when you hear the word or the phrase rape culture?
Do you want a textbook definition, or do you want to know?
No, I just want to know what you think.
So, I don't know. It's hard to define rape culture because there's so many different ways to look at it, and people see it differently no matter where you're at. I guess the way that I see it is just anything that involves the word rape or anything that envelops the act of sexual assault. Where the culture part comes in, not too sure.
Exactly, and that's the thing, because nobody seems to be very too sure, except maybe the radical people that tend to push the notion. But I'm going to read you what the definition of rape culture is according to the internet world. So, rape culture, as defined by the internet, is a sociological concept in which rape is normalized through societal attitudes about gender and sexuality. For example, rape jokes, sexist jokes against women, objectifying women, a lack of outrage from society when there is a rape case involved, and offenders not being held accountable. These are all examples, and there's many, many more. So what do you think about that definition?
I want to say it sounds pretty accurate, to be honest with you. It's hard to believe that people would think even today that rape culture is a thing, considering if you look at TV shows, music, and anything that involves media or entertainment. There's a lot of that kind of stuff just in what we watch.
What do you mean, that kind of stuff?
So, I mean, I'm not a big I don't listen to a lot of new age hip hop.
Okay.
But recently I started working with somebody who does, and I've really gotten to listen to a lot of Cardi B's music, and a lot of it is very sexual oriented, very out there about performing sexual acts. So I can't really say I agree with rape culture, because the people that are also standing against this are also the people that are supporting her. So how can you really do both and still be offended by it?
Absolutely. I mean, we were gonna touch on that later, but just for our viewers right now, because this topic is very sensitive to many people, I want to make this very crystal clear that we are not attacking rape victims in this session.
Not at all.
We are not criticizing anybody who's been through sexual assault. We are going to dissect this social concept as two guys who, Jason, I'm assuming you were never molested or raped growing up.
Never.
Me neither. So we have no idea what this looks like through a survivor's eyes, but I just want to talk about, as a normal, everyday, law-abiding citizen, my perception on what rape culture is and how I've heard it used. That's all I want to talk about today. So I don't need a bunch of people messaging us telling us that we are attacking rape victims or anything like that, because that is not true.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, Josh. First of all, any kind of sexual assault is a crime and should be treated as such. There's nothing right about it, and anybody who participates in those kind of acts are probably the spawn of Satan. And again, we're not out there to attack anybody. We're just taking a social concept, and we're gonna kind of break it down and dissect it a little bit and try and make sense of it, I guess.
Well, to get further into the subject, I just want to point out that rape culture seems to focus more on oppression of women. But every now and then, somebody who is talking about rape culture will recognize male victims when, mostly like in a prison setting, when we talk about like prison rape and stuff. But it does seem to be more of an attack on men, because when people usually talk about rape culture, they'll talk about toxic masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on toxic masculinity? Do you think toxic masculinity is a thing, or do you think it is kind of been exaggerated by feminists and social justice warriors?
So, define toxic masculinity for our viewers. A textbook definition.
A textbook definition I can't give you. We're going to have to look that up. But from my understanding, the way it's been used is a type of masculinity that gives men the impression that they have to basically sear their emotions and act in a very, tough, unbroken, almost John Wayne in a Western type way. I don't need anybody. I don't need anybody's support.
Okay.
Into a way where it becomes toxic for men. And usually what comes from it is they start mistreating people who are around them. And ultimately it ends up killing them at some point.
Well, toxic masculinity is everywhere you look. And that's more defined by each person individually. There's people that obviously like ourselves. I can't speak for everybody else, obviously, but ourselves, we're not those kind of guys. I'm not afraid to wear my emotions out on my shoulder. I'm not gonna lie to you. I watched The Dog's Purpose. I cried 3 times. I mean, it is what it is. It takes a real big person to admit that they need help or to admit that they might need somebody, and it's huge at that point for that person, and it's leaps and bounds realistically for that individual to step up and say, look, I need some help. I'm struggling and I can't do this on my own. So that toxic masculinity that you talk about is very key when we start looking at the way that it goes into rape culture. But yes, toxic masculinity itself is I don't know, man. It's out there and I've seen it and it's not good.
Well, and I just don't know, because obviously when you look into society and we start looking at things like rape culture and toxic masculinity, we can see the symptoms. My problem is when people get these very shocking titles like rape culture, toxic masculinity, and they start slapping it on these symptoms, when I think the problem is much more complex than just, oh, we have a rape culture and we have a toxic masculinity problem. But sticking to rape culture, my criticism for the societal concept of rape culture is, it's just, in the end, it's plain old fear mongering. It's a faceless enemy that can be applied to anything, and ultimately, I don't think it is progressing our society when somebody comes out and accuses somebody of being part of rape culture. Now, I have been accused over the internet of being a perpetrator of rape culture, and it kind of made me chuckle, but it's like, if I'm a perpetrator of rape culture, then it must not exist, because I am not a rapist, obviously, and I don't think you are either.
No.
So I think it's very dangerous when you start throwing around these titles, because rape to me is a very serious term. It's a very serious crime.
Absolutely.
And so when somebody starts watering it down and calling somebody like me over the internet because we're having an argument about something that I'm perpetuating rape culture, then it's like, call me sexist or call me whatever, but don't just throw the word rape culture around, because you are making it lose its meaning.
Absolutely. And the textbook definition, like you said, is basically normalizing the idea of rape, which obviously should never happen. But accusing somebody of rape culture, I mean, you can, in that aspect, you can throw a label on people who cuss. You could throw a label on people who talk about fishing too much. I mean, realistically, that's basically what it is. I mean, people are going to make jokes. People are going to try and be funny. They're going to, and, we had an incident. We talked about it at work this past, yesterday, actually, where somebody said, use the term rape, and not in a derogatory manner, but just to describe, the outcome of a game. And realistically, we don't think about it when we use it, because to us, we know what it means. But at the same time, like you said, we're not here to, shame victims or anything like that, because we can't imagine what they've been through. And I can't imagine that those victims see things the same way that we do. And so as a society, we also need to stay conscious of that too, that we don't know people if they've been sexually assaulted or raped or molested. And yes, using it in the general public definitely shouldn't be done, because all it's going to do is just spark that argument and that discussion that we don't want to have, you know. And like you said, fear mongering, absolutely. People, I mean, we're getting into a society where females particularly are kind of scared to go out anymore, you know, because they don't know what's going to happen. You know, we grow up in a very crime-filled society, and as bad as that may seem, I don't think that rape occurs as often as people want to make it sound. I could be wrong, though.
Could be, but we could be wrong about all of this.
You're not wrong.
Well, I just, you know, when who do you think of? Who do you think actually goes around spreading awareness, so to speak, about rape culture? Like, what group comes to mind, or groups?
Realistically, I'm gonna throw feminists out there.
Yep.
I really feel like they're out to get the man. You know, they're out to make the man look bad. You know, us men in general, not the man, but men.
Yeah.
And which, as you know, our job is very labor intensive, and we have 2 females that work with us now, and they work just as hard as the men do. So these irate feminist people who feel like men are privileged and things like that, which we're not gonna get into that too far at all, but it doesn't exist. And so again, they're throwing a term out there to try and maybe fit an agenda that they're trying to move, which we all know they are.
Yeah.
But that's probably the biggest group, to be honest with you.
I mean, I've heard everyday people use the term, but yeah, the biggest ones that you're going to see on blogs are usually coming from hardcore, very left-leaning social justice warriors, or, you know, very hardcore feminists. And when these people talk about rape culture, again, they're trying to include both men and women, you know, who have been victims of rape. But in the end, it always does sound like an attack on men in general when you're talking about rape culture. Now, again, here's another criticism that I have about rape culture. Rape culture, without even knowing about it, when you use it, you almost give the perpetrator of a rape case an outlet, because if we do live in a rape culture, then this rapist had no other alternative but to rape because he was encouraged by his society. So, without even knowing about it, you are providing an excuse for this rapist. And that's not your intention, but that's what's happening.
That's the outcome.
And that's why I do not think we live in a rape culture, because the way that I grew up and the household that I grew up in, I was never specifically sat down and told, you don't rape anybody, Josh. But I was always told to respect people's property and respect others, treat others the way that I want to be treated. And I didn't always follow these things, but I was always told these things. And so it kind of came without saying that if a woman didn't want to have sexual relations with me, then that was common sense.
Tough crap, right?
Yeah, it is what it is.
You walk away and you move on.
You move on, and you know you swing and you miss. It happens. But you know, if we lived in a rape culture, then I would be told, oh no, you need to go chase her down, and you know, you do what you have to. And it's like, I don't feel like I've been encouraged by society to do such a thing.
I don't feel like anybody has at all. I mean, you shared that article from Marshall University, which was an interesting read actually. But one of the things that they listed on there, as you had discussed with me, was the one concept of teach men not to rape. Well, at the end of the day, you can't teach somebody who's our age to not do something because they've already been set in their ways. I mean, yes, it should be common knowledge. You don't pin a girl down and have your way with her. That's not how it works. But there's guys that don't know any better. And whether it's a mental issue or a mental health issue, but, you know, we don't know that. But like you said, we're not brought up to say, well, like you said, if she says no, you do what you got to do. No, none of us were raised that way, especially in the Midwest.
Especially, but and I feel like our society in general despises rapists. You know, when we find out that somebody's a rapist, we do not encourage them. We don't make excuses for them.
Absolutely.
We do not say, oh, it was the victim's fault, like people who try to spread awareness about rape culture say that we do. When we find out that somebody indefinitely raped somebody, we not only prosecute them. I mean, that person's lucky if the law gets to them before citizens.
Exactly, because I mean there was a case years ago where a Texas father shot and killed the man that raped his daughter, and the judge didn't send him to prison for that, because like you said, as a society we know it's wrong, and like you said, if Lord have mercy if he gets caught by the police before citizens catch him, because who knows what could happen.
Exactly. So, and I believe if we did live in a culture that was perpetuating rape or encouraging it, that wouldn't be the case. I mean, this is an individual to individual morality stance. But if you have to tell a man that rape is wrong, then you've already passed the point of no return. This guy has passed the point of no return.
You kind of already lost the battle,
Yes.
essentially.
And we can all agree most of this stuff starts at home. Your morals, what you choose to follow, what kind of citizen you're going to be. A lot of it starts in your early childhood, how you were raised. And most rape cases that take place in the house, most of the time it takes place in a house where there was no father, or the father was just a bad father, like he was a drunk or he was absent.
Mm-hmm.
And every now and then, even more heartbreaking, sometimes it is the dad that is doing the sexual assault.
Yep.
And that I couldn't imagine, because I don't know about you, but I grew up in a house with a very strong male figure. My dad, because of who my dad was, I didn't have to ever worry about a creepy uncle or a creepy family relative, because they knew that they would have to answer to my dad.
Yep.
And because of who my dad is a law-abiding citizen. He's never been in trouble with the law in any serious manner. And so when people said, you're Dan Young's kid, that carried weight, because they knew that I lived in the same house as my father. And I recognize that a lot of people do not have that. They do not have a strong father figure, and I feel like it makes it easier for predators to move in on them.
Okay, can I throw something at you real quick?
You definitely throw.
So could you say that in a certain aspect that households having two incomes now to survive, being both the parents being gone, whether at the same time or in separate shifts, do you think that contributes to maybe some of that bad upbringing?
It definitely does not help.
Okay, so that's kind of where my mindset was at when you were talking about that, because I know, like, when I was growing up, as we discussed on a previous episode, my grandfather lived with us. We took care of him for a while, so my mom didn't work. My dad was self-employed, and so I always had somebody around. But my dad, I spent a lot of time at his business learning and working and doing things like that. So I was always around, his like-minded individuals like he was. And so that stands for a lot of my upbringing and why I see things the way I do, and why I felt like I grew up at a really young age, because I would go to Halo parties and I would literally have discussions with my friends' parents rather than them, because I was on that level at such a young age, because I had that upbringing. But getting back to rape culture in itself, I definitely don't think that shows like Family Guy, if you've ever seen the show Big Mouth, shows like that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love them. They're funny shows, whatever. But shows like that to a young mind, 100% does not help, but put a bad influence and bad ideas into somebody's head.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We can look at our society and we see a million problems. We see a lot of bad influences. You were talking earlier about Cardi B and her music, and I just don't understand, because these feminists will attack anything like what you and me are talking about right now. A feminist would probably be pulling her hair out and emailing us very angrily because we are talking about a subject that she feels that we have no business talking about. But she will purposely ignore the fact that Cardi B is out there sexualizing herself. And most women that I've ever met are not near as, openly sexual as Cardi B is. They don't have the platform, or they don't have the confidence. Not every woman's like that.
Well, let me stop you there for a minute. But let's go back to way back, or like mid-2000s. So Eminem put out a song, it's called Stay Wide Awake. And I believe it was on his Relapse album, if I remember correctly. And the whole song is about, and this is a guy singing about, the whole song is about how he rapes this girl and kills her. And that's the whole song, is how he starts, how he gets there, what he's doing, and then how he finishes the job. And so that in itself already promotes, those bad habits. So if you were listening to Eminem back when you were in middle school, high school, by the time you're 20 years old, I mean, this is stuff that's been ingrained in your head. Now, whether or not you have the values or the morals to not do it, like you said, it depends on your upbringing. I was not allowed to listen to rap when I lived in my parents' house. They did not allow it, And as I got older, I understood why. But now I listen to a lot of rap and whatnot, and it is what it is. But like you said, it all comes back. A lot of it comes back to that original upbringing that you have.
Yeah. And my last criticism of the concept of rape culture that I want to ask you about is, when one of these cases is brought to the table, and we hear about it on social media, when a woman is raped by a man, we always hear about victim blaming. You've heard this term, victim blaming. So, what my criticism is that usually there's a bunch of people that come to the conclusion that we cannot make excuses for the perpetrator. Like, we cannot criticize the woman for dressing inappropriately or hanging out in a bad setting, because in the end, we don't want to teach women to prevent rape. We want to teach men to not rape. And in a perfect world, that is ideal. We should be teaching men not to rape.
Absolutely.
And women should be able to walk around the street and into any club wearing whatever they want and not have to worry about that. But this is reality. And getting back to reality, my criticism of rape culture is that it doesn't allow for any sound advice, because any advice that is offered to the victim or to a woman who hasn't even been a victim yet, hey, honey, be careful who you're hanging out with at the bar, be careful when you go to the bar, is looked at as victim blaming. Well, I shouldn't have to worry about where I go or how I'm dressed, because men shouldn't be raping. And again, in a perfect world, this is absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
But in a perfect world too, I would be able to walk around North Omaha with all my cash out, with 30 grand, counting it in my hands. Now,
and not get shot.
And not get robbed or mugged or whatever. But in the end, it's not a good idea. It's not a good idea. And so the people that spread awareness about rape culture, they disregard any sound advice because they disregard it as victim blaming. And I grew up on sound advice. I was always taught an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Mm-hmm.
So I do not think it's smart to try and re-educate society to protect women. I fully believe that women should exercise their Second Amendment right and, learn basic self-defense, and that is the best way how you can fight off a rapist. If you don't want to do that, then yes, you are at the mercy of the police or other citizens, mostly men, to prevent you from getting sexually assaulted in public or getting out of a sticky situation. You are depending on these people. I don't know about you, Jason, but I don't hate my fellow citizens, but I do not want to depend on them for my safety.
No, absolutely. And you're 100% correct. And the thing is females should not have to rely on self-defense to go out and have a good time. And that's where that victim blaming comes into play. But at the same time, you never know who you're going to cross. I mean, we live in a small town, and I've crossed some sketchy people going to the bar. And that's why, I always try and tell people, no matter how old you are, whether you're a friend, whether you work with me, whoever you are, if you're like, hey, yeah, I'm going out tonight, make sure you take a friend. Oh, in ladies, I can't stress this enough. Always go on a date in a public setting, somewhere that's going to have a lot of witnesses, because it's going to prevent that. But did you also know, this is kind of a different subject, but there's a statistic. If a rapist can't get your clothes off, I think it's in somewhere around 30 or 40 seconds, they give up. So yes, females should not be scared to go out and wear skirts and dresses and look pretty. But at the same time, that's always something to keep in mind when you do some recon on the location you're going to be going to with your friends. Find out what kind of area it is. And that's just something that we can do as a society to help prevent this stuff. But to the men out there, if you see somebody at a bar that just won't leave a girl alone, step up and do something about it. Whether you have a girlfriend or not, at the end of the day, you could possibly save that person's life. You don't know this. And when in the military, we're trained the same way. We're trained on how to pick up on certain social clues, on how to prevent that kind of stuff, and read it. And I'm sure, like, okay, so when you were in corrections, I remember one of the biggest things that was told to us: don't wear cologne when you go to work.
Oh, I broke that rule all the time.
And I think it was more for the females than it was the males, but I was also trained in a facility that was all males.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have females. And so it was more of a thing for the females, but like they said, you never know, because that inmate could possibly, be like, man, this smells good. And you never know.
Yeah,
you know,
you were always taught not to cause extra attention and stick out, especially if you were a female.
Exactly. And so, I mean, the biggest piece of advice here to help reduce the amount of rape just in general would be just, girls, travel in packs. You guys are really good at that. I mean, 100%. But we do need to get away from victim blaming, and we do need to get in listening to sound advice. I don't care who it comes from. If you know it's sound advice, take it. Because if somebody's willing to take the time out of their day to give you that little bit of advice, that means they care about you and they don't want anything to happen to you, even if they're just your friend. You're important to them.
And if you're not willing to take sound advice, then there's nothing that can help you. You're on your own. But, I mean, and I do think as a society, for the most part, we have gotten away from victim blaming. We don't charge victims.
No.
As a matter of fact, somebody can make a false rape allegation and walk away free, even after it's been proven to be false.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that this is where I disagree that we live in a rape culture. When you have people on the internet who are commenting very insensitive things on articles, that's just, unfortunately, that is one of the ugly sides of our culture now. People do that.
This is
they are
side
insensitive.
of humanity in general.
Exactly. If there's a guy who sits around on his computer all day in his Boston apartment, what does he care if if a woman in Florida gets raped viciously or is date raped? What does he care? He just wants to troll. He wants to stir the pot.
He wants to see what kind of reaction he's going to get out of people.
You're never going to get a guy like that to give a shit about your case.
No,
so you're fighting a losing battle.
Yep.
And I just find it ridiculous. Now, I do want to move on to some things that I recognize and that I actually that I can believe from people.
Absolutely.
Who spread awareness about rape culture.
That's another thing I want to put out to listeners too. Throughout these podcasts, these sensitive talks, we're gonna look at it from both angles and kind of give you guys both sides of the perspective here. So, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, the things that I can recognize that I agree with that come from people who talk about rape culture is women are undoubtedly objectified in our society.
Oh, absolutely.
Through the media, through music, through entertainment, women are 100%.
So, to caveat on that, I saw this documentary on Hulu today, actually. I started watching it, I didn't finish it, but it's about how sexting became a thing. And I feel, and sexting objectifies women 100% of the, but in a certain light. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't help the situation. Yes, women are objectified all over the internet. And I mean, it's just it's crazy to think of how common it is. You're absolutely correct, not to cut you off, but
no, you're fine. And the thing is, when we talk about women being objectified, it's always assumed almost through the lens of feminist theory. It's always assumed that it's men objectifying women, which most of the time it is. You can't really even argue that. However, in modern times, it seems like a lot of women are sexualizing themselves. And they almost kind of want to walk the line of, I want to be as sexual as I can be without the threat of being sexually assaulted. And again, in a perfect world, you absolutely should be able to do that. You should be able to be as sexual as you want without having to worry about some dirty dude putting his hands on you. But again, this is reality. We cannot re-educate these screwed up men to not go out and sexually assault women. Either they know not to do it or they don't.
If in good proof of this is get on Instagram and just look up fitness models. These aren't even like models. These are fitness models. Females that work out. Okay, and start scrolling through some of the comments on their pictures and look at what's being said. So yes, women are objectified way more than we see. Not it used to be a verbal thing, the cat calls when you're walking down the street, that kind of thing, the typical
that still goes on.
Yeah, the typical construction worker, he's like, "Ooh, baby, what up?" "Hey, call me." Like she's driving down the street, like what's she going to do, get out of the cab and come running back to him to get his number? No. But it's becoming, in a digital age, it's becoming a lot more, and they talked about this in this documentary about how you have that protection of a glass screen in front of you. So this person doesn't really know who you are. And so it makes it more it actually makes it more creepy, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But like realistically, guys, go out there and just randomly just look for a fitness model if you don't follow any already, and start scrolling through those comments and start seeing what kind of dirtbags are talking to these women that they don't even know and talk. I had a buddy who his biggest thing was like he never had the need to force himself onto women because women were naturally drawn to him, but he learned how to be fluent with his words, and that's how he picked women up. He sounded educated. Not that he wasn't, but the way that he was very articulate and the way that he talked made him more smooth than he already was. And it was, and so that's the difference between objectifying women and actually being smart about it. But
no, you're definitely not incorrect. Another thing that I can recognize with rape culture is, when like the Christine Blasey Ford incident came up with Kavanaugh late last year, there was a lot of people who were saying, well, why didn't you report it? Why didn't you report it? And I've heard this a lot in many other sexual assault cases. Now, the Christine Blasey Ford, whatever her name is, I don't buy it. I thought it was a political stunt. I thought she was completely full of shit. But going back to a person who has been sexually assaulted, reporting that type of incident to the police, I would believe, is not easy at all.
no.
Because the police do not approach things like a counselor. They are not very sensitive. They're about solving crime, so they're going to ask you some very straight-up questions, and they want some very straight-up answers. And if you just... I've never been sexually assaulted, but I have been in a lot of situations that have got my adrenaline up, that have, really made me feel, I might have died. And so having to relive that is not an easy thing, especially talking about it to a stranger. When you report to the police, in a perfect world, you should be reporting to a very organized group of individuals who are out there to help you. You are reporting it to the authorities. But in real life, you are in reality, you're getting strangers involved in your very personal business. So I can definitely see why a lot of women do not report their rapes.
No, 100%. And we discussed that in the military as well, just from that side of it, because they're really big on the sexual assault and harassment prevention in the military. But like they said, you can always go to a friend, and if you're not comfortable reporting that, you can tell your friend, hey, I need somebody to know this, and your friend can do that. Yes, and the thing is I 100% agree with you, Josh. Police officers and these people. Listen, if you're on a rape case or you respond to a rape situation, don't have 4 officers go and interview the same person. You need one officer, preferably the same gender as the victim, because they're going to feel more comfortable talking to the same gender. You have that person, that single person, interview that person, because every time that this person talks about this horrific event, they're just reliving it. And I can't imagine that that's not much different than coming back from war with PTSD.
Right. It is different, but it's, the same type of chemistry in your brain. When you go through something very, very, up close and personal, like an attack or I would even imagine a sexual assault, your life can be changed forever. And so in those first, months that you're recovering, it's not going to be very easy to talk about it. So I understand that completely. So when I hear people talk about, well, why didn't they report it? I mean, I get it. I get why they didn't report it.
I had a buddy who was molested as a kid, and it was kind of strange how he told me, because he couldn't actually tell me face to face. He actually had to type it out in his phone for me to read it because of how it made him feel. And that was, and that's a perfect example of that. Was, people don't want to relive that, and so yes, it's huge that they have somebody that they can go to, and yes, it makes a lot of sense why a lot of people don't report sexual assault or rape.
Another point that I can agree on with people who talk about rape culture is, you do need to teach your boys responsibility. You need to teach them that this stuff is not okay, and you need to teach them young. But again, I was never sat down as a young boy and told, Josh, you should not be sexually assaulting women in any capacity. But I was told many times over and over again to respect other people, respect their privacy, respect their items. Don't take anything that's not yours. I respect people's time. And so it went without saying that sexual assault and rape was just never on my agenda.
My dad was always a big person of, you never put your hands on a woman, ever.
You don't put your hands on anybody. We live in a society of white knights that are always talking about, oh, you should never hit women, and you should never do this. You don't put your hands on anybody unless they are deserving of it. And deserving of it means strong violence, or they are being very reckless, or whatever, Every now and then somebody's comments, I don't agree with, hitting everybody who is talking shit. But every now and then a good attitude adjustment is in line for somebody. Whether they're male or female. But yeah, you don't put your hands on anybody. And if you do, you should expect to have hands put on you.
Exactly, 100%. And
here's the other thing. If we're going to talk about rape culture and we're going to be more sensitive to sexual assault victims, we need to be more sensitive towards the male victims, because I feel out of this whole process, they're the ones that get ignored the most.
Yeah, and males do get raped. It's a lot of people think like, oh, you can't rape a man. You're very wrong.
Let me put this to you this way, and I actually learned this when I was in prison as a correctional officer from another correctional officer. But we were talking about child molesters and why they're so hated by inmates, and he kind of put the idea in my head that I never really thought about. But like the inmates that hate child molesters, they really target the ones where the victim was under the age of 12. A lot of these guys don't really care about a guy who got charged because he had sex with a 16-year-old, because a lot of inmates, a lot of dudes understand that. They're like, shit, she's 16, 17 years old, like, I get it.
Yeah,
but
a victim,
it
doesn't make it right.
No, it doesn't make it right, but they get it.
Yeah.
But the ones that they take really personal are usually the children, are usually the guys who raped a young boy. And he this other correctional officer kind of put this idea in my head that because a lot of inmates were probably molested or sexually assaulted when they were younger, and they never reported it. They never actually got, they never had the opportunity, or they never felt comfortable enough to actually report it. But when you think about it, most of those guys do come from a fatherless household. Their moms, a lot of the times, were very irresponsible, brought a lot of men around, so it made a lot of sense why they have such a deep hatred for child molesters.
Yeah. Absolutely. I don't know. I've never, like I said, I just have the one buddy that was a victim of that. But even now, it's and the thing is a lot of these kids, and we're gonna step down to kids now, because kids don't know where to go. They don't have that outlet. They don't have that guidance to say, hey, if this is happening, you need to tell somebody. Because honestly, we don't really think about it. We in school, we were never told, hey, if your parents are ever touching you in a naughty way, you need to tell somebody. Because honestly, it's a subject nobody wants to hear about, but it's a subject that needs to be addressed.
Oh, and it is getting addressed. I just think our society And I think these social justice groups and feminists, they do a very poor job of addressing it. They think they're doing a good job, but ultimately they're doing a very poor job. Me Too was supposedly the time where everything got put on the table and this was going to be a new era for sexual assault victims.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, a lot of us saw the bullshit with Me Too. And unfortunately, I thought it used a lot of sexual assault survivors to give them this false pedestal or this false platform. Like, hey, we got your back, but ultimately it was just a political stunt to get a lot of guys out of power. And so
And-
I don't think it progressed our society in any way. I
No,
really
and
don't.
in the Me Too movement in itself, the concept was a great concept. It was a really good concept. Finally getting all this out on the table, addressing the issues, things like that. But it's the way that the advocates went about it that made it basically fall off the map. It was
Yes.
really prevalent for about 3 to 4 months, maybe 6 at the most, and then after the Kavanaugh situation, it kind of died down. And that's where the advocates, like you said, political stunt to get men out of power. Well, yes, now we're not saying that they weren't victims of sexual assault in that time, but the problem is there's no way to prove that now.
No,
And
there's not.
And so, you got to take your best judgment at that point. And that's why like it's so imperative that these victims come forward and they talk about this, even if it's just to a friend, because that friend can document that. They can say, hey, look, this did happen. And whether or not it gets reported is up to that victim, but at least there's a witness to say, yeah, she did call me, this did happen. And that way, you got to have some kind of a trail.
Right. You gotta have something. But I hands down think that it was the Kavanaugh situation that killed Me Too.
No,
Because
I
think
agree.
the public saw firsthand how that this movement went way too far, and it was no longer about giving justice to sexual assault victims as it was as a political assassination and mob rule.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it messed up. And it's too bad, because I'm always cheering for the underdog. I'm always looking to empower my fellow human beings for the most part, and especially victims, people
Yep.
who have been through a lot. But these movements are not the way to do it.
No, and the best way to do it is, honestly, if as a female, talking to anybody out there right now who's listening to this that has gone through that situation, if you didn't report it, that means that there's a possibility that somebody else was a victim to this same person. And I get that it's hard. I can't feel what you have felt going through this, and I really wish I could. But if you report it, you're going to get that person off the street and save another female from going through that. So be an advocate in that way. Go out there, support these other rape victims or these victims of sexual assault, but report that stuff so we can get those guys off the street. That's the only way that we're gonna corner this, because the more and more that this starts coming out in this situation, the more and more these guys are gonna be like, man, you know what? I'm not gonna get away with this. And it's kind of like when we talk about, mass shooters.
Yep.
You start shooting back, guess what? They're going to start thinking twice before they walk into a building, because they're going to be like, man, there could be 5 guys and they're armed. Like, we got to fight back with putting these people away and getting them off the streets and kind of putting their own medicine, using their own medicine against them.
Yep. You will never rid the world of violence or violent men.
Never.
You will never rid the world of rapists or men who go out there and rape. Yes, I think it goes without saying that most rapists, by far, I would say it's in the 90%, are men. Now, increasingly we have heard about more women preying on children, but we can talk about that in another
Wait, are you
recording.
talking about the teachers?
Well,
The teachers that have been reported?
Oh, yeah. That's definitely the big one. It's actually become a joke that if a man wants to molest a child, he becomes a priest. If a female wants to molest a child, she becomes a teacher.
Yeah, so that would be what people would list as rape culture.
But we are going to talk about that in a completely different one, because to me that falls more into pedophilia.
Absolutely.
It's statutory
Yep.
rape. But just to stay on topic, I forget where I was even going with this. But the point is that you will never rid the world of very violent and bad men. Most of society's problems, unfortunately, do come from men who were raised very poorly or just evil men. But the solution to these evil men, unfortunately, is other men. you have to depend on good men to fight these guys, because I recognize there's a lot of strong women out there. There's women out there who are better marksmen than me, and they might be able to run faster than me. But at the end of the day, you need a good man's strength to fight off this evil.
So to put you back on topic, you were talking about how 90% of rapists are men.
Oh yeah. Even most male victims who have been, just about all of the male victims who have been raped, it was done by another man. So these are things we cannot deny the fact that men are mostly the perpetrators.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's take it back a minute though. Something you don't learn in history class in school. Christopher Columbus back in, was it 1680, 16 whatever year that was, that he sailed the ocean to come to America.
Was it like 14 something?
No, I think it was.
Was it 16?
I don't remember.
We're gonna look it up because we sound really stupid right now. I'm sorry, guys, but school was a long time ago.
Yeah, it really has. But anyways. Something that wasn't reported was, or that you don't learn in school because obviously we don't talk about the subject in school, was that Christopher Columbus did pillage and rape Native Americans. So rape dates all the way back to before the colonies were even formed.
Well, how do you think you got the whole Latino culture? I mean, a lot of it,
not talking out of Latinos at all, but that's how Latinos were.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Spaniards did a lot of that.
Yep.
And when you go to Mexico, you'll see all sorts of different shades of Mexicans. You got light-skinned ones, you got really dark-skinned ones.
Yep.
And,
Well, that came from the Spaniards, the conquistadors, when they went and invaded the Mayans.
Oh, yeah, and not all of it
was
rape. But the thing is, rape has been around as long as human beings have been alive.
So just to caveat on the fact that Josh said, you will never rid the world of violence. It's been around for centuries.
It's been around for a long time. And the fact that we live in the digital age now has definitely exposed a lot of this to more people. But I just don't think you're empowering victims the way that you want to, because I still think at the end of the day, victims are still feeling isolated and alone. And Me Too and these movements and calling things rape culture is not the way to empower them.
No, absolutely not. I mean, you got the best way to empower it, like I said, is just be an advocate. Be an advocate for those people that have gone through this, and we can try and rid the world of as many of these evil predators as we can. And realistically, I use predators. A lot of people use predators when they refer to pedophiliism, but I feel like anybody who's out to hurt somebody is a predator.
Yes, and human beings definitely. There's a good portion of our people, no matter what race, no matter what society. There's always predators, always people out there looking to prey on people, whether it's for money, sex, or whatever. But sound advice, staying vigilant, is definitely the best advice that I can give people. But people don't want to do that. Just like when we talked about the mass shootings, people want to be able to be as comfortable, as free as they can be without any responsibility of danger. Basically any responsibility of staying vigilant. They want to be comfortable, and that's what I get when people talk, or that's what comes across to me when people start talking about victim blaming and all that. Like, well, you shouldn't be telling her not to dress that way because that's victim blaming. It's good advice. Like I said, in a perfect world, a woman would be able to dress however she wants, would never have to worry about the guys putting their hands on her in any way or trying to drug her. But we don't live in a perfect world, and unfortunately in this world, you cannot make it. The government cannot make it. Policies can't make it. Even your fellow citizens cannot make it to the point where you can just be as comfortable as you want without being vigilant. You need to stay vigilant.
I constantly stress the fact of situational awareness to people, and we talked about it in our mass shooting episode about people constantly walking with headphones in their ears. Go back 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago, that wasn't a thing. People didn't walk around with headphones on all the time.
No.
Because if you did, your Discman would skip, right?
Yep.
But we're so used to zoning out and being our own person, which there's nothing wrong with that. But when you have music blaring in your ears 100% of the time, you're never going to know when somebody's trying to talk to you, flag you down, try and stop you. anything like that. But not only that, not just having music in your phone, but walking and staring at your phone the entire time.
Yeah.
Like look around. Especially if you're out at night and you're in a dark part of town or not necessarily a good part of town, but don't walk being on your phone. Make sure you know who's around you. Make sure you're watching people around you. I go, and like I said, anytime I go anywhere, whether it's daytime or nighttime or no matter where I'm at, I'm constantly looking around because I want to know who's around me, what they look like, just in case something does happen. I have some kind of recollection as to what was going on around me, because that's the worst thing when you get interviewed by a cop or a police officer or a detective to get details as a witness and you can't tell them anything because you didn't you weren't vigilant and you didn't have that situational awareness. However, a caveat onto that, if I can, is the ability to whip out your phone really fast and take a video. That has helped a lot.
Yeah.
But it's not going to stop it.
No, you're not going to stop it. The game has changed. The game has changed big time when it comes to attacks, when it comes to sexual assault, when it comes to anything. But it's never gone away, and it's never going away. So when you're out in public, you're always taking a risk. And one thing that I've kind of come to realize is that women are definitely more vulnerable to attacks and stuff, just because most of the time they're smaller, they're not near as strong. I mean, so I've kind of come to realize that as I'm older, that when I'm out in public, I'm still pretty vigilant and I'm still looking for an attack. I'm not really looking for somebody to try to sexually assault me. I might actually be flattered if somebody tried to, just for the fact that I'm not used to that.
Right.
But, I have seen it definitely at bars where women are getting all sorts of unwanted attention from these really just messed up dudes, and it's like, man, I feel for that, because that's annoying. And most of the time it doesn't progress any further, so
Exactly.
there was no need for me to ever step in at these times.
Yep.
But, yeah, so, I guess I get that part of it. The other thing I want to talk about is I want to focus more on women's role in this whole concept.
Okay.
And that is that when I read a lot of these blogs about rape culture and stuff, it always talks about women in general as the whole population of women are scared, that they're very scared of being raped. But then I look at a lot of entertainers like Ariana Grande. I look at entertainers like Cardi B and Nicki Minaj, and these women are very sexual. They have a lot of songs where they're talking a lot about sex, and you would never get the impression that these women are scared of being raped. And then even when I go downtown, I see a lot of girls who are very sexual. They're dancing in a very provocative, very sexual way, and they just don't give off the persona that they're very scared. But I have met a lot of women who, I would call bookworms or shut-ins, and they don't go out often, and they don't dress provocatively. And it's like, I just see a polar opposite in the female population, and I don't think one part of the female population is helping the other in this respect.
How so?
Because when you got a bunch of female artists talking all about sex and sexual stuff, and then you get a bunch of women who really aren't comfortable talking about that stuff. A lot of those women feel like, well, men look to these women as sexual objects, even though they never asked for this attention, because the first set of females have kind of set the standard. Or a lot of these women will say that a lot of men will look at them as prudes and disregard them because they're not putting out enough sexual energy as the Nicki Minaj's or Ariana Grande's, So I think that it's not just men who, if there is a rape culture, it's not just men who are perpetrating it. It's a lot of women as well.
Yeah.
So it's not just we need to fix our men. We need to fix our people. We need to fix
our generation.
And honestly, I don't see it happening. I really don't. All you can do is take care of yourself and your household the best you can.
It was funny. I was listening to Tim Rex's Now or Never podcast, and in one of his episodes, he talks about how the children, not our generation, but the generation below us, how they've grown up with the digital age and how bullying. He talked about more of the bullying side of it, but how because they've grown up with it and they don't want it, they're going to be the ones that fix this. We may not see it in our lifetime, But if anybody's going to fix it, it's going to be that generation after us.
And I don't think they will, honestly.
I don't think they won't fix it 100%. But they will definitely find a way to mitigate more of it.
No, they're going to find a way how to change the game, and that's it.
You think so?
I believe that full-heartedly. I don't think they will be equipped to know how to fix it. I really don't.
And it's crazy because like when you think about how technology advances and how things just in general how fast they grow, a predator's tactics are going to change too, especially based on, you know, if he's down 100% to do this, he's thought this through multiple times on how he's going to do it, where he's going to do it, who he's going to do it to, and that's kind of one of those things where it's like as technology advances, as the evidence, the way to collect evidence, and all that advances, they're going to find ways to get away with it.
Yep.
And that's why it's so important to report it so that you can get these guys off the streets.
Yep, but again, I understand why somebody doesn't want to talk to the police.
Absolutely, and the biggest thing that we can remember for all of us is if you do know a victim of rape or somebody comes to you with the experience or the tragedy that just occurred, you have to be sensitive to them. You know, you don't want to peg them for a lot of questions. You don't want to sit there and needle poke them and try and get all the information you can. You just need to console that person because they literally just had probably the most traumatizing event of their life. And at this point, they don't even know what they're going to do. They don't even know what their next move is. And so just as general human beings, we need to be sensitive to that if somebody comes to you with that claim.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I just don't think people are very good when it comes to dealing with trauma. There's a few individuals out there who are good at being counselor, but if you're expecting a bunch of sympathy from society, no matter how bad the situation is, it's just, you're not going to get it. You are looking in vain. And honestly, again, it's not society's responsibility to be sympathetic towards you. In a perfect world, that would happen.
Yeah, but there's people that are 100%. You know, there's always gonna be victim blaming, but we can try and get away from this term of rape culture, and just look at it as just a traumatizing event that happened.
And we need to get away from trying to demonize our entire society and demonize the rapist, because at the end of the day, it is all on the rapist. It is not society's fault. No matter how much we've talked about media and other entertainers and all of that, these are just small contributing factors. These are not things that we blame, because at the end of the day, it's always on the rapist, and we need to hold them accountable.
100%. And it's going to come down to us as individuals and us as people is to do that.
And trying to label our entire society a rape culture is not the way to do that.
No.
That is counterproductive.
Well, in using the term rape culture because somebody might have made a joke or somebody might have, you know, used the term in a joking manner or just in a non-derogatory manner, I guess. That's not going to fix anything because it's always going to be used. And yes, I have noticed as the generations have progressed, we have moved away from using the term raped. I know when I was in high school a lot, we'd be playing Halo and be like, man, we got freaking raped that round. Yeah. Hands down was a huge phrase that we used all the time. But I haven't heard that phrase used in a long time. And it's more of like, man, we got pwned or we got smashed or we got, absolutely annihilated. Yeah. Like, we need to get away from using the term as much as we can, And so that in itself will help kind of bring this down, but we need to get away from the whole concept of rape culture because it doesn't exist.
No, it doesn't. If rape culture exists, then we also live in a murder culture, then we also live in a fat culture, then we also live in a vegan culture. I mean, it doesn't stop. So again, slapping a label on rape culture just because we have a lot of sexual immorality and people who are predators in our society is not productive. It is counterproductive, and that's my whole point here today.
Absolutely, Josh. I think we've talked on this subject for enough today, being a sensitive subject and all. I'm kind of interested for you guys as our viewers to kind of give your 2 cents in on what you think. Just remember, we're a couple of guys out here just looking at it from an outside perspective, trying to give you guys a different perspective to look at it. Again, if you guys want to send comments and things to our email, it's midwestmymelt@gmail.com. Josh, you got anything to add?
Well, just message us. Let us know where we went wrong, where we didn't, and we are open to new ideas. And if anybody wants to debate the topic, I am more than open to do so. We can do it over social media. But
We do have a Facebook page as well.
But otherwise, I appreciate anybody who's listening, and
Yep.
I'm good. So have a good night, infidels.